This is my lean-to greenhouse. It's early spring right now, so you want to be especially concerned about actively managing your greenhouse. You're going to want to be concerned about the temperature, humidity levels, making sure your plants get enough water, the pest pressures, and of course maintaining adequate ventilation. Now, what temperature you want to have in the greenhouse really depends on the type of plants that you're trying to grow. Usually you can lump them into two categories, either your warm season plants or your cool season plants. Your warm season plants are going to be like your tomatoes, your peppers, your eggplant. The cool season plants are going to be your broccoli and cauliflower, your lettuce and spinach. So your warm season plants, you're going to want to have 70 to 80 degree days and 50 to 60 degree nights. Your cool season plants are going to prefer 50 to 60 days and 40 to 50 nights. Now obviously I mix them together. I mean, there's times where I've got the cool season stuff and the warm season in together. Now, the way I handle dealing with warm season and cool season plants, I have an electric heater for the winter and the spring. And basically what I do is I have it set to a thermostat which controls the power. And the thermostat back here, this thermostat here, is set to 40 degrees. So if it dips below 40, it starts to get to that temperature where your warm season plants could be damaged, the heater will kick on. Typically, and the reason I just set it to 40 as opposed to having it even warmer in here is because it'll get expensive. And I have no problems with my tomatoes or peppers dying when it's 40 degrees. It's when it gets down to the mid-30s and below is when it becomes a problem. And your cool season stuff will do fine in 35, and they'll even survive a light frost. Although if you're growing them in the greenhouse, I would suggest at least keeping it to 40. Now, as far as humidity goes, you're going to want somewhere between 50 to 60% humidity. It can get difficult. When it's cool outside, it's usually very easy to keep the humidity up. But when it gets hot and the sun's beating down on your greenhouse, it's hard to keep enough water on the plants. And things can dry out really, really quickly. A lot of times I'm watering twice a day, a thorough watering when it's warm out. And it could just be in the 50s but real sunny, and it gets piping hot in here. But a couple of things I do to try to maintain the humidity is I have a couple of these 50-gallon trash cans and I fill them with water. It'll help with the humidity, but also because they're black, during the day it'll suck up the heat, and at night when it's cold it'll release the heat, so it'll help with my heating of the greenhouse. Ventilation is also really important. During the day when it's warm, I'll usually just leave the half door open, that way to get the cross ventilation, and I have another vent at the other end, open that up, let the air blow across the plants. And then there's also the roof vents up here that they're filled with a gas that as it gets hot, it expands and automatically raises and lowers those, which are nice, but just the roof vents are usually not enough ventilation on a really hot day. Water is going to be the most important element to your greenhouse. It's going to be very, very important that your plants are getting sufficient water. I have a hose bib inside the greenhouse, which is important because especially if you're heating the greenhouse in the winter, you don't have to worry about hoses freezing up. Also, if you're filling up watering cans and bringing them out to your greenhouse, that's going to get very old really quick. Also, you're going to want to find a nozzle that has something that's a gentle shower or even a mist like this, because if you have a normal nozzle, it'll be too hard on the new seedlings. Now, if you're using good potting soil, pest pressures usually aren't too much of an issue because you're using a fairly sterile growth medium. However, if you're using compost from your garden, chances are you may get a few pests tagging along. And the problem with having that in a greenhouse is that there aren't any natural predators, so you can see pest pressures expand pretty quickly. If you notice that, I try to keep a watchful eye. If there's stuff that I can pick off by hand, I'll do that. If I can quarantine items and get them out of the greenhouse before a big outbreak happens, I can do that. Now, at a last resort, I will spray. Now, as we get further along in the spring, I'll start to take out some of my cool season plants for transplantation. Now, this is my broccoli and cauliflower. This is their first day outside, so I'm probably going to leave them out today for 3 or 4 hours. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to gradually increase the amount of time that they spend outside it's a period which is called hardening off. And what that's going to do is over the week, they'll spend more and more time outside before they actually are planted in the ground. And by the time they're planted in the ground, they're nice and adjusted and can deal with any transplantation shock that might happen.